They know that Trump is going to fire on all cylinders back at them by bringing in counsel, which they did. They brought in a former partner of Mark Pomerantz in order to try to defend it. But here's the beautiful thing, and I always quote Buddha on this. The three things that will always rise: the sun, the moon, and the truth. And the truth about Donald Trump every day is coming out.
Welcome to On Brand with Donny Deutsch. I am Donny Deutsch, and this is the podcast dedicated to a simple premise that everybody and everything today is a brand. Every institution, every religion, every celebrity, every athlete, every politician, everybody and everything is a brand. Every product, every company. Look, if you got a Facebook page and you're putting out images of yourself and you're kind of setting an essence out, then you're a brand also. A brand is a set of values, and what we do here is a couple of things. First, we do our brands of the week, and these are the kind of brands that are up and down, kind of driving the zeitgeist, where we're going, which brands are up, which brands are down, and why, and where we headed. And I interview an iconic brand in and of themselves, an individual brand, and this week it's Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen, who, of course, famously was Trump's personal attorney, ended up turning on Trump, ended up doing some prison time as a result, but has a lot to talk about inside, working for Trump for 10 years, and what it was like to be in prison, and just inside the mind of Trump, according to Michael Cohen. It'll be a great interview. But first, let's get to our brands of the week. Our first brand of the week is a big brand down for Sean Hannity. This is Sean Hannity, of course, with Fox, and he's been a brand. Him and Tucker Carlson fight for first place on brand down on this show. Everybody knows why politics is. This is amazing, and when you this is almost out of, you can't even believe it's real. Basically, he's been using the Afghan crisis and talking about the politics of it, and then drifting into his sales pitches for My Pillow and other things. I'm going to read some identical, some verbatims from his show. He says, you can't believe it's real. This is a stampede, not only out of Afghanistan, but a stampede away from high prices, overpriced service from the big carriers like Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile. The average family making the switch to Pure Talk. He literally said, so he's talking about a stampede out of Afghanistan and then drifts into it as part of Sell Copy to talk about a stampede out of overpriced service from big carriers into Pure Talk. Another one, he goes, this is amazing. How would you like to be in Kabul today? As an American and you can't get to the airport, where are you thinking your life is headed? And then he asks, if you're one of those family members, I bet you're not sleeping. I don't even think My Pillow can do it. MyPillow.com. You can't believe this. Actually, using the tragedy in Afghanistan as kind of a setup to him selling his stuff. It defies logic. He goes, that's where I go. I fall asleep faster. I stay asleep longer. So basically, literally saying, if you're worried about somebody in Kabul, if you got somebody there in a life or death situation, maybe you'll sleep better if you use My Pillow. This is what fucking Sean Hannity is doing on his show. So a huge thumb down for Sean Hannity. I had to read it 3 times. I couldn't even believe it was real. A brand up for the Democrats, kind of what I think should be and could be one of their, I don't know if it's a literal slogan, but something to think about. Fund the police. Now, look, I've talked about this on Morning Joe with Joe, and that what the Republicans are going to come out in 2022 is that Biden didn't know how to, keep Afghanistan safe. He can't keep you safe in the streets with immigration and crime up, and the Democrats wanted to fund the police, which is the furthest from the truth. That's just the fringes of the fringe of the party. And if you look for proof, it's interesting. If you look at New York, they pivoted from slashing almost $1 billion in police funds last year to actually adding $200 million this year. Oakland boosted its police budget in June by $38 million last year, after setting a goal to cut it by $150, so they're adding to it. Austin, which is a liberal town, passed its largest ever police budget. It diverted $150 million in police funds to other parties last year, shifted it back. So I would be offensive if I was the Democrats, and I would be doing a fund the police platform. Don't wait for the Republicans to come at you. You have been getting behind the police. You have been getting behind safety. Don't let them take that flank from you. So fund the police, brand up for that. This is a brand down for something called Getter, Gettr. Now, when Trump was thrown off his free speech platforms, he's thrown off Twitter and all the other very places. Trump advisor basically came up with an alternative, Jason Miller, and he started something for Trump called Getter. And unfortunately, Getter does not seem to have much of an issue with making sure it's safe for child porn and things like that. New research from Stanford Internet Observatory Cyber Policy Center has laid bare the danger of the platform's almost complete lack of moderation. It's identified more than a dozen child abuse images being shared for Getter users. Look, one of the most widely used pieces of software is something known as photo DNA that all of these sites use. It stores a list of child exploitation imagery against which platforms can check uploaded content before it's allowed. But Getter is not using this. And if they'd been using it, they would have had 16 matches ready. So Trump's new free speech platform, Getter, seems to be free speech for child abuse also. So a brand down for Getter. That's Gettr. A brand down for North Carolina. It's trying to show, well, I guess maybe brand up. They're trying to do something about it. Set its reputation as a destination for child weddings. You know, there are still places in this country where you can get married when you're 14. That's right. This is not 1954 we're talking about. North Carolina currently allows marriages to those as young as 14. New legislation proposed in the state would also add a 4-year spousal difference, make it illegal for 16-year-olds to marry someone older than 20. Children can get married under the age of 16 in 13 states in this country. So brand down for North Carolina and some of the other states. Alaska is still expressly permitting marriages as young as 14. In 9 of the 13 states, there's no age restriction, and a judge's approval is all that's needed. So if you want to get married, you're that young, you need a judge's approval. But the fact that you can still legally get married at 14 in this country in certain states, North Carolina being one of them, a big brand out. 14. Think about that. This is the year 2021. Brand down for our good friend Governor Ron DeSantis. He seems to be every week. He's in a fight over school mask mandates. He took a dramatic turn on Tuesday after the State Board of Election ruled 2 defined school districts broke the law. He's trying to remove these elected officials. Of course, now Biden is trying to come in federally. But I want to say it again, and I've covered it on the show, that this is going to come back to haunt this guy. I know he's seen as the heir apparent to Trump, and he's done well in some of the initial straw polls. But when you're doing something that you're actually fighting to keep children safe, you're fighting against it, keeping children safe, that's going to come back to haunt you. Short-sighted, stupid. Ron DeSantis, a brand down. A brand up for what I'm calling now, I see a lot on the air, COVID confessionals. A very effective, we've talked so much in terms of how and what we can do to keep to any message out there to get people vaccinated. What I've seen is very effective, and I've seen them popping up in social media and on the news, are very sick, sometimes terminally sick COVID patients who had not gotten a vaccine and are now saying in the most heartfelt way, I wish I would have, please do it. And I think that's very effective, these COVID confessionals. In other words, what's more effective than somebody who turns to the camera and you see is deathly ill and says, look, I was like you. I didn't believe in the vaccination for whatever reason. I wish I got it. So a thumbs up or a brands up for these COVID confessionals. Staying on COVID, a couple more things. Atlanta Falcons, big brand up. It's the first NFL team to vaccinate all of its players. That's right. If only one with all of its players vaccinated. They had 92% vaccination as of the middle of July. They've upped it. Across all 32 NFL teams, the vaccination rate is above 75%. Now, it should be more than that. The country is just about at 70%. You would think in a contained environment with educated, infrastructures around the NFL that the average should be more than 75%. 15 teams have a rate over 95%. That's good. That's good news. Just to show you, I always say that women are smarter than men. The WNBA has reached a 99% vaccination rate. Somehow the WNBA can figure it out, but the NFL still hasn't gotten there completely. Major League Baseball announced that 23 other teams had reached the 85% vaccinated threshold rate. And but let's give the Falcons kudos. They're the first one with all of it. Let's also call out the Las Vegas Raiders. They are going to be requiring proof of COVID-19 vaccination for fans attending home games. That's what you got to do. This is the way we keep everybody scratching their heads on TV. What do we do? Make it so that people who can't live their lives the way they want to live them until they get a vaccination. If you are a rabid football fan, not being able to go see your team play, or if you are season ticket holder, is going to cause you to get a vaccination. So it's just keep cutting the legs off, and that's all you got to keep doing. So thumbs up to the Las Vegas Raiders. Brand up to Pope Francis, encouraging COVID vaccines in the media campaign. I mean, if the Pope's not going to get people to do it, I don't know who's going to get to do it. He says getting the vaccines, he says that are authorized by the respective authorities is an act of love. And helping the majority of people to do so is an act of love. Getting vaccinated is a simple yet profound way to care for one another, especially the most vulnerable. So there you have the Pope. Brand up for the Pope. Pope Francis has been great. Comes out in a lot of places where previous popes went to, and that's it. A brand up for Honus Wagner. Honus Wagner, the most expensive baseball card ever sold for $6.6 million. That's right, a baseball card for over $6.5 million. It shattered the previous highest selling card. Baseball card belonged to a 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle card that sold for $5.2 million. And it eclipsed a record later matched by a 2003 Upper Deck exquisite collection LeBron James autographed rookie jersey card. Now, the Honus Wagner card, what's so interesting, there's only about 60 of them in the world, and most of them are not in good shape. And what makes them so rare, particularly this particular T206, is that he somehow made the American Tobacco Company, which was making the baseball cards, stop using his likeness. And people weren't quite sure if he didn't want to be associated with cigarettes, or wasn't paid enough money. But that's why it's so rare. This from this T206 set, because he was a guy that was ahead of his time. He was selling gum, soda, gunpowder, razors, lent his image to cigar brands. So we're not quite sure why he stopped them making the Honus Wagner baseball cards with his likeness on it, but it certainly made it worth a lot more money. And finally, I bring that up to my friend Steve Cohen. Steve Cohen, who's the owner of the Mets, I had on the show here a few weeks back, and the Mets have been struggling and sucking lately, and he finally spoke up and just came out directly on Twitter and said the best teams have a more disciplined approach. The slugging, the OPS numbers don't lie. And guys like Steinbrenner always got a bad rap when they would come up and, kind of put their players down or go after them or, just kind of try and light a fire. But look, if somebody ran a company, if I had highly paid employees and they were not performing as well as their peers, they're not performing well with people paid what they're paid, I'd be speaking out also. So, I think, and guess what? After the first time he did it, the Mets broke a 4-game winning streak. So this is brand up for owners that are passionate and come out and speak their minds. And I think athletes are motivated the same way a lot of people are. You call them out and that's it. So, and those are our brands of the week. So coming up now is my interview with Michael Cohen, Trump's former attorney. I think you will find it incredibly, incredibly interesting. Take a listen. Okay, I want to talk to you about Human End Super Beats Heart Chews. Look, if you're like me or anybody else, your day is busy. It's so hard to get the right nutrients you need. You think about work, you're thinking about your friends, you're thinking about your family and everything like that. And it's easy to not take care of yourself. And this is why you need Human End Super Beats Heart Chews. Look, it's basically what I love most about Super Beats Heart Chews. They're tasty, they're quick, they're easy. It promotes healthy heart energy. It's plant-based. It combines non-GMO beets with a special ingredient, grapeseed extract. And it's really unique to Super Beats Heart Chews. This stuff is great. This is a great nutrient supplement for you. It's been the focus of scientific research for years, grapeseed extracts, and it's kind of its special X factor. Basically, you can't find this quality of grapeseed extract in just any product. This grapeseed extract is clinically studied, quality tested, traceable to the source, and scientifically shown to support blood flow and healthy blood pressure. Healthy blood flow means more energy, the way nature intended, without the jittery caffeine or stimulants. Just add 2 delicious chews a day, and it gives the blood pressure support you need and the energy you want. Do what I did and support your heart health and delicious Super Beats Heart Chews. Get your Super Beats Heart Chews today at superbeats.com/Donny. And when you buy 2 bags, they'll throw in a third for free. That's Super Beats, superbeats.com/Donny. Superbeats.com/Donny, the nutrient you need. I want to welcome to On Brand a very special guest. He's become an iconic brand in and of himself. He's a very dear personal friend of mine. If you've been watching the news or living on this planet the last few years, you've seen him a lot. You've heard his name a lot, Michael Cohen. Michael, of course, was the chief in-house counsel for President Trump before he was president. We all know Michael's story. Michael kind of changed life's course He turned on Trump and has now dedicated his life to kind of bringing to the truths of all that is wrong Trump. And I welcome to the show Michael Cohen. Michael, and also the host of Mea Culpa podcast, which has everybody from Ben Stiller to James Carville and everybody in between. He's become a media mogul since his...
Yeah, sure.
Of course, we know he's...
Nothing compared to you, Donnie.
We know he served some time in prison. He's still in home confinement, another few months of that, and then he'll be a completely free man. Welcome to the show, Michael Cohen.
Good to see you, Donnie.
First of all, how you doing overall?
Look, I'm hanging in there. Still 3 months and 5 days left before I'm finished with the home confinement, despite the fact that I have another set of legal documents in before the Southern District of New York in order to terminate the home confinement as well as any supervised release at the bare minimum based upon my cooperation. You see, a lot of people turn around and they use the term flip. I didn't flip on Donald Trump. What I did is I provided truthful and accurate testimony. I cooperated with law enforcement, which is actually an obligation that we as citizens have, right? We are required to cooperate and to provide evidence and testimony if in fact that we're called to do that. Now, as the system works, you could either do it voluntarily, which is what I did, or you could do it via subpoena. Now, under the Trump administration, you probably remember there was a multitude of people who chose to ignore the subpoenas. I chose not to. I felt it was my obligation and duty, not just to my family, but to the country.
Well, Michael, let me start, because the big question you always get asked, and you and I have talked about this in great detail, is that you did when you got in trouble. And so the kind of rub in the whole thing is, okay, well, and this is what I want you to comment on, okay, he saw God and he did the right thing, but that's only when he was backed up against the wall.
Well, when else are you just supposed to walk in and say, hey, you guys are potentially investigating the president? How would I have known what was going on unless I was called in to testify, which I was. And yeah, it was pursuant to, one of them was a subpoena that was under the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. Mm-hmm. But nobody had asked me to speak or to cooperate prior to what had happened to me. Remember, out of nowhere, they came, they raided my home, my hotel that I was staying at, and I was not there on the lam, 2 blocks, as you know, from my primary residence. I was there because we had a flood in the apartment, thanks to a neighbor leaving their window open during the winter. Then on top of that, they raided my law office as well. And based on the information that they believe that they accumulated, they threatened to, indict me with an 80-page indictment, as well as to include my wife. And I wasn't prepared to take that risk.
Do you think
with her?
Do you think you should have gone to jail?
No.
But to somebody who says, well, you did break the law, you did perjure yourself, you did, there was issues with your banking, there was issues with taxes. So
respond
to those.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I need to respond to that one. One of the things that I took responsibility for what I did wrong. I absolutely lied to Congress. The lie, as you know, because I had spent quite a bit of time with you during this entire ordeal.
Yeah, I want to, for full disclosure, and Michael, I was advising Michael a lot during this. Michael's a dear friend of mine, and as Michael was going through this with Congress and was going through this with the U.S. government, as a good friend, I spent a lot of time with Michael. So I can't be objective about everything, but that's why I also ask you some of the tough questions in terms of that somebody at home is going to ask you.
Which is fine, because without answering the tough questions, the people don't know the truth. I took responsibility, and I still to this day take responsibility for what I did wrong. And what I did wrong was the hush money payment that was made to Stormy Daniels, which, as I stated to the court and to Congress as well, was done at the direction of and for the benefit of Donald J. Trump. And I want your listeners to understand this. It's very important. They have to understand that I didn't sleep with Stormy Daniels. Donald Trump did. and there's a whole book written by Stormy about it as well. There are a multitude of checks which demonstrate the repayment, which the Trump organization took as legal fees. I wasn't really aware that you can get your pecker pulled by a porn star and declare it as legal fee. I mean, only the Trump organization can come up with some type of, interesting, scenarios in which that they can defer payment that way. But I had very little, if anything, to do with the Karen McDougal matter. That was all David Pecker and AMI and Dylan Howard. But nevertheless, I was charged with it. The same thing holds true when they claim that there was misrepresentation to a bank. And my comment, as I told them, that's bullshit, and you know it. I have 80% equity in my home. I had more money sitting in the bank that that the mortgage was in than the mortgage and the HELOC combined. The HELOC, which everybody, if you don't know what it is, it stands for a home equity line of credit, which is basically, just to change the way that the words are, it's a line of credit based upon your home's equity. I had literally 500 times the equity in my home than what the amount that I was borrowing. So the fact that a bank could have been in danger of some misrepresentation, it's just not true. On top of that, I have never defaulted in my life. I've never been late on a bank payment.
Your contention is that yes, you lied to Congress on behalf of and the direction of Donald Trump, and that the other charges, the tax charges, are just you don't think anybody else would have gone to jail in your situation.
Well, that's correct. And one of the things, and again, I'm not now saying this today on brand with Donny Deutsch, anything different than if you look at the November 30th, 2018, Michael Cohen, it was done by my attorney, Petrillo, under the Petrillo sentencing memo, dated November 30th of 2018. Pages 13 through 19 spell this out exactly as I'm stating you today. First of all, the tax evasion. Now, I will acknowledge that there was an error in the taxes, but it's not tax evasion. It was a tax omission. I have never in my life been audited. I have never received a letter from the IRS. I have never in my entire life requested an extension. During the time that I didn't pay $1.3 million in tax, I had paid $6 million. Nobody tax evades by paying 80%. Was there an error? Yes. Whose fault? It's my contention, and I'm suing my accountant right now, my former accountant, for malpractice. And so far, we're winning in the court. Even the mediator turned around the other day and said, "Holy shit, this is it's pure negligence on your behalf," because every single dollar was sitting in Capital One Bank that was located at the base of the building I live in.
Let me. I hear you, and you and I have talked a lot about this. I want to just go to the brand thing now. Does it behoove? I'm now saying what's best for you, not necessarily as far as what's truth, what's not truth. That your, what's the word I want to use? Your stance at this point should be, yes, I lied on behalf of the president. The other stuff, I believe, was thrown in to just kind of get me, this is what the government does, and move on. Instead that, there's still too much your brand. I'm talking about moving your brand forward. Should be, because I sat on the street with you and somebody walked by and said, "You're a hero. Thank you." And half the country would look at you, and if they had their way, they would have you killed. And half, I don't mean literally, and half the country sees you as a hero. And focus on moving forward of, I made a mistake. I got involved with that. What you've said so many times. I made a mistake. I got involved with that guy. It's a cult. I did some stupid things. I'm a better man for it now, and I want to spend the rest of my life doing all the right things. That the more you get into the weeds there, I know how frustrating it is for you, that it still becomes that you're the victim. And yes, you were victimized in certain things, but there was I'm now talking about your brand, the Michael Cohen brand, because I've seen people on the street stop you and go, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." And I would want you to focus going forward more on what you did, that you stood up and you took responsibility, and that you have this whole kind of new brand in front of you now.
And the answer is, I agree with you, but the truth is always the truth. And the government does not act truthfully. You know, Kara Scannell of CNN, actually, she put out a story about 4 days ago. And the story was that Alan Weisselberg had lied. He's the CFO of the Trump organization that's now recently been indicted himself, that he had lied to the Southern District of New York prosecutors. Yet, despite that fact that he lied and that they knew that he had lied, the Southern District of New York still used Alan Weisselberg in order to obtain an indictment against me on the lie and knowing that it was a lie. Well, look, I understand that they all have careers in front of them and that 7 of the people that had worked on the line in order to come after me ended up going to Davis Polk, Lowenstein Sandler, McDermott, Will and Emery, Guggenheim Partners. I mean, these are all 7-figure-a-year salaries based off of what? Now, I acknowledge I lied to Congress. And what's interesting is, again, that was done at the direction of, and not just for the benefit of Donald Trump, but it was also done in conjunction with Jared Kushner, Ivanka, Jay Sekulow, and a handful of other attorneys that were out there representing their clients and worked on the speech that I had given, which I was then charged with what's called the 1001 violation. So I acknowledge what I did wrong. But wouldn't it be nice for someone to acknowledge what they did wrong? I can't be the only one.
Yes. Speaking of doing wrong, and you recently said you believe that Jared Kushner may have already flipped on Trump. Give me your handicap on what is going on. Everybody stops me. What's going on with the Southern District with Trump? What's going on with the Attorney General? What's going on? You know, when is something going to happen? When is this? So give me your handicap on what you know and understand, both from just knowledge you have or your gut, about what's coming down with the indictments with Trump.
Okay. We have to break this down into 2 aspects. The first aspect is the Southern District of New York. And my biggest fear, and if you follow me at all on Twitter, you know, there's another gentleman that started this guy named Rich Signorelli. He's a former SDNY Harvard law guy. He talks a lot about this, that when it comes to the hush money payments, which I want to be clear to your listeners, Donald Trump is as guilty as sin onto it. I'm not sure that they're going to bring in action before October, and post-October, the statute of limitations will run and he will get to walk free from that responsibility, which is not right. Why the SDNY is doing this? Well, I think the problem is that they're protecting themselves instead of doing what they're required to do. They're all protecting their reputations, you know, existing as well as those that used to be there. And that's a real problem. And that's why people don't trust the Department of Justice. They don't trust our legal system anymore. And that's a very dangerous thing to happen. But now you have, thank God, the district attorney. We have Cyrus Vance Jr. Right. But Cy Vance Jr. did something which is incredible. And I've given him a lot of accolades onto it, and he deserves it. He stepped away from a major investigation and turned it over to an expert, a gentleman by the name of Mark Pomerantz. And Mark Pomerantz is a guy who comes out of a major white glove firm. He's handled all sorts of RICO cases, including the indictments and the prosecution, I believe it was of John Gotti. So this is really a lawyer of the highest quality. And I believe that the Alan Weisselberg indictment is just the beginning. I'd like to see, just like all of you listeners, everybody would like to see this happen quicker. We are all living in a Google age where whatever you want, you get it in 1.8 seconds at the latest. That's not how the wheels of justice move. This is a obviously significant case. They know that Trump is going to fire on all cylinders back at them by bringing in counsel, which they did. They brought in a former partner of Mark Pomerantz in order to try to defend it. But here's the beautiful thing, and I always quote Buddha on this: the 3 things that will always rise: the sun, the moon, and the truth. And the truth about Donald Trump every day is coming out, from the Kara Scannell CNN article all the way down to what he did by fleecing his own supporters of like $150 million with that box that you had to click. Otherwise, they were going to charge your credit card each and every month, despite the fact
So
the
what do
supporter
you
only
think,
wanted to make a one-time.
You've spent hours and hours and hours with Cy Vance being interviewed. Now, you can't talk anything specifically about that, but in your gut, what do you think they're going to bring? What kind of charges do you think, just based on what we read, what we see, what you know? I mean, without anything that you can't disclose. If you were going to predict what they're going to bring against them, what are the charges going to be?
Yeah, I think that there are more indictments coming down. Obviously, there's several things that are happening now. You have Alan Weisselberg. The goal, of course, was to turn him. Do I think that Alan Weisselberg will ultimately cooperate? I think he's going to have no choice, because they're doing what they do, and they put pressure on everybody. And it's not just Alan Weisselberg that is under investigation, but so is his sons, both Barry and Jack. Jack for Ladder Capital, Barry for his handling of things at the Trump organization. But he's just the beginning of it. And there are other people, like they already brought in Jeff McConney, who is Alan Weisselberg's assistant controller, who testified before the grand jury. So there's a lot that's still going on. But like all of your listeners, like you, Donnie, we all want it to happen faster. Faster doesn't mean better, though.
So are the charges going to be related to the things that we see, for instance, quoting a price for one thing for a loan and another thing for insurance, and bank fraud that way and insurance fraud that way? And are those the basic charges, the kinds of things we're going to see?
Yeah, I think it's that and more.
Right.
Obviously I can't go into what the sum and substance of my more than a dozen conversations with the district attorney's office. But at the same time, it's that and more.
Yeah. You think he'll end up doing jail time?
I'm sorry?
You think Trump will ever do jail time?
I think Trump is in trouble, and I think so is Don Jr. I think so is Ivanka. I think so is Jared. I think that there's a whole slew of issues right now that are being looked at by the DA. And again, Mark Pomerantz is a very, very fastidious individual. He's not jumping just because there's the evidence, which many of us would say, he's guilty as sin, right? Let's just move forward with it. So he wants it to be ironclad.
Sure.
Because
as well
again, you're going after, as it should be.
As you're going after a past friend. You've said somewhere you think Jared may have flipped already.
So I have said that, and I've said that because it's interesting that Jared, who was the secretary of everything, seems to be, again, out of the spotlight. How? First of all, we know 666 Fifth Avenue was one wacky sort of a deal. To those people, again, who don't know,
explain what went down with 666 and how he got out of it, and it just kind of, without going so deep in the weeds of real estate, because there is a smoking gun there.
Right. So 666 Fifth Avenue is a real estate. It's a piece of property. It's a huge building. It's known as 666 Fifth Avenue. And it was also known, when Jared decided to buy it, that it was the absolute worst real estate deal ever done in the history of New York City. The worst. He overpaid probably by about $800 million on that property. And the note was coming due, and it was a big, big loss to the Kushner company. And it would have potentially been a devastating loss to the Kushner company and put them into serious financial harm. Somehow or another, and of course we can only surmise that it had to do with his foreign relations or using his office as senior advisor, that they get, I believe it was it was one of the Middle Eastern countries had put money into a hedge fund.
It was
yeah, maybe Cutter. Put it into Brookfield Properties. Brookfield Properties came and rescued the situation. Somehow they managed to get out of this unscathed and with cash in their pocket, which nobody ever thought was humanly possible.
There was no bank, there was no institution, there was no fund that was going to give them money. It was so dead, and all of a sudden this strange foreign money comes in.
And again, the truth will ultimately rise.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of time before somebody comes forward and they provide the documentation that shows the illegalities that took place here. But, I wanted just to come back to, to where we started this conversation, and that's about changing your brand.
Right.
Now, Donny, and again, full disclosure, we know each other well over 2 decades, and we've spent many hours together. What hurt me the most is the way that I was characterized by not just Trump, but by these Republicans that, especially members of Congress, that needed to disparage me at every given opportunity during the House Oversight hearing that almost like 100 million people watched. And one of the things I said to this moron, this Jim Jordan, do you realize that I've been here now over 3 or 3.5 hours, and not one Republican asked me one single question about Donald Trump? Because that's what I thought I was there for. But instead, it was all about disparaging me, staying on message. And then I said to Jim Jordan, listen, I know what you're doing, right? And I said it to Mark Meadows, too, who's another moron and a half, right? I mean, I said, I know what you're doing. I know the playbook that you're running. You know how I know it? Because I created it. So don't run my plays against me. It didn't do right for me, and it's not going to end well for you. And guess what? It seems that I'm right again. Right? Mark Meadows' reputation is tattered. Jim Jordan is a laughing stock of the entire Washington elite. I mean, he looks stupid, right? So when we talk about brands, I took responsibility. I actually ended up accepting responsibility for things that I didn't even do, like the tax evasion. If I can go back to that for another half second, if you look through, and most people didn't, and I got very angry at a lot of the media when they would call me to ask me about the Southern District of New York sentencing memo about me. I said, well, did you read mine? No, well, we skimmed through it. What do you mean you skimmed through it? Spent a lot of time on that sentencing memo, drafting it. It's very relevant, and it's even relevant today because I wanted to accept responsibility, but I wanted to really accept responsibility for what I had done wrong, not for what Donald Trump did wrong, for what Alan Weisselberg did wrong, or what anybody else did wrong. I want to take my responsibility for my part, but I don't want to be the villain of Donald's story.
I hear you. I just want to say one more on current news stuff. The golf courses in Scotland, how all of a sudden it's come out that where the numbers don't add up as far as money going in and money coming out. So just give me your take on what you think is going on there, where how those golf courses were funded, which would see the numbers just don't add up.
Yeah, so I don't really know much about the Scotland. I've been there. It was run basically by Eric Trump and another attorney at the Trump organization who's no longer there, a guy named George Sorial. George, worked on the design, worked on all of the permitting. But I've said this so often. There's an old expression, Donny, numbers don't lie, people do. And Donald Trump is just a notorious liar. There's a big joke, right? How do you know Donald's lying? Well, his lips are moving.
Right.
And there's nothing that comes out of the guy's mouth that's true. And he'll lie about anything or everything so long as he thinks that it benefits him. Well, that works when you're not the president of the United States, when you don't have the entire journalistic pool out there fact-checking everything that you're saying. So if, in fact, that there is improper money that was either being used and funneled through Scotland or Ireland or any of the other foreign golf courses or the one in Dubai, believe me, now that all of the tax documents, in part thanks to me, are in the hands of the district attorney and soon will be in the hands of many members of Congress, they will ultimately get to the bottom of this. And again, he will be held responsible for his dirty deeds.
You mentioned Eric Trump. Talk to me, because you had a front row seat for 10 years. If you can describe his feelings on each of his children, if there was basically, he was sitting and and it was just full, honest, raw, and he was describing his relationship or his feeling or his take or his descriptions of his children. Let's go one by one. Eric.
Okay, so let me begin by just saying, obviously, people should know that Donald has 5 children.
Right.
Right? So the easiest way to get rid of 2 of them is just to start backwards, right? So you have Barron, which I would never talk about.
Sure, he's a young
man.
Okay, right.
He's a child. Then you have Tiffany. And I've always described Tiffany, and Tiffany spent a lot of time, like with my daughter. They went to school together. They lived next door. They've been friends since like high school. Of course, they don't speak anymore, but Tiffany was always known as the redheaded stepchild, right? Even though, of course, it's his child, he had very little to do with Tiffany. So that has to already begin to set the stage for your answer. What does he think about all of his children? They're merely only relevant to him as it benefits him. Now, people may find that as a strange thing. It's why he favors Ivanka, because he thinks that every woman in the world wants to be Ivanka and every guy wants to date her or marry her. And neither of which are true. Every woman in this country does not want to be Ivanka. Actually, most women despise her. And every guy is not there looking to date her or to marry her, right? Or is in love with her. This is Donald's perception, maybe because that's how he feels, right? And as we know, he has discussed that if it wasn't his daughter that he would date her, which is just an absolutely gross thought in and of itself.
No words for that one. Yeah.
But no words. So talk about Eric for a second. Again, if I had to rate the children, Eric would probably be of the top 3, right? Don, Ivanka, Eric.
Those are the ones
Eric would be number 2, right? In terms of Donald's interest in the child, right? He and Don Jr. have been butting heads their entire life, despite the fact that Don Jr. has been on many media tours now, specifically NRA, hunting, shit like that, right? His comments about Don Jr., you would never say about your children. I certainly would never say about my children. And I certainly would never say it in public to every single person, from the waiter at a restaurant all the way to, your close friends, if he even has any close friends. So you would never say stuff like that. Eric would be number 2, right?
What kind of stuff did he used to say about Don Jr.?
Well, about that he is the worst judgment of anyone he has ever met. But he would throw in expletives. I don't know if I can use the expletives on the show.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, so he would come right down and say, Don has the worst fucking judgment of any fucking human being that I've ever met in my entire life. And if it wasn't that he's my namesake, I throw his ass out of this company altogether. Right? I mean, he would say it to everyone and all the time. Yeah. And listen, in many cases that he was justified. Don has terrible judgment. He went into business with bad people. He did stupid things many times and often. Then, of course, there's Ivanka. And Ivanka, is the favorite of the 3. But I want people to also hear me on this. If it's a question of whether Donald himself goes to prison or Ivanka, have a nice day. Because he is, in his mind, the supreme leader. And everyone, including his children, are beneath him and are there in order to benefit him. And it's a weird thing.
So he doesn't have the normal instincts that we have as parents, that we would do anything to protect our children. We would take a bullet. Obviously, we'd go to jail before having them go to jail. You're saying with him, it's the opposite. He would go to jail first. I mean, he would send her to jail first. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, he would throw Don Jr. first under the bus,
right?
Eric second, and then Ivanka third. And I can just give you an example of when this happened. I talk about this in my book, Disloyal, which, ended up becoming a #1 New York Times bestseller for a reason. Because it's accurate. And the story that I tell in the book is the fact that, during the original Cy Vance case, which dealt with the Trump Soho property, they had lied about the number of sales and the price per square foot that they were achieving. Well, that's illegal. And so they were looking at Don and Ivanka, who were running the project, and made the statements by the district attorney's office. And I remember Donald calling me and a couple of other guys into the office, and he said, if we have to send one of the two to prison, just let it be Don Jr., because Ivanka would never be able to handle it. And Don would be fine. These are like his kind of people. And I sat there scratching my head and saying, holy shit, he didn't really just fucking say that, did he? And then when we went back to our offices and we were talking about it, myself and these other lawyers were scratching our head and saying, holy shit. I mean, I would have expected him to say something like, we have to make sure that neither of the kids go. But if it was a question of killing the investigation by sending one of them away, just make sure that it wasn't Ivanka, that it should be Don. So if you think for a second that Donald is going to go to prison under any circumstances where Don Jr., Ivanka, Eric, Jared for certain, right, or anybody else, Michael Cohen, right, anything to benefit him, have a nice day.
Michael,
I'll send a car to pick you up when you get out.
I want to go back to pre-presidency and I want you to describe, because people think the Trump organization is this sprawling empire, and it's really a mom and pop. Describe, and I've talked about this on the air, describe the office, the setup, and what a day was like for you as kind of his consigliere. I mean, just kind of, let's just go through a typical day and dynamics and physicality and take me in there.
Okay, so you're right. Perception is not always reality, and it's definitively not reality as the way Donald would describe it. First and foremost, let's just start with his net worth. He's not, nor was he ever worth $10 billion.
Of course not.
Each and every year, our goal was to raise him on the Forbes 500 list, and that's where these fake personal financial statements or these distorted personal financial statements came into play. But to give you an overview of the Trump organization, it is not thousands of people working, for him. It's not an Amazon. It's not a Google. It's not a Facebook or a Tesla, or it's not even a Zeckendorf. It's not. It's just not. It's a glorified mom and pop company with Donald as the president and CEO, owning 99% of all of the stock of this company. And to take something out of Meet the Fockers, right, the Robert De Niro circle of trust,
right,
there's maybe 14 people, 14 executives. I was one of them.
Right.
The 3 children are there. So in essence, if you think about it, there's really only 10 others that would fall within that circle of trust.
Right.
And everything sort of revolved around the 14 individuals, whether it was regarding golf, whether it was the general counsel or the assistant general counsel, or me as his special counsel, only working with him. Every day we would be summoned to his office, and depending upon what was going on in the office, at least 10 times a day. So I was one of the first ones. Alan Weisselberg and I were always the first into the office. I obviously, live only a few blocks away from the office. I'm also an incredibly early riser, so I would get there like before 8 o'clock in the morning. And the second that he would come down from the penthouse, his triplex, I would get called into the office, by either him or Rona or one of the other secretaries that happened to be there. Michael, Mr. Trump, let's say, sure. I go in. Sometimes it was just to shoot the shit about absolutely nothing. Other times it was about something that was going on. And then if it was something that was going on, other people would then get summoned to the office as well in order to handle some of these tasks and so on. But it's not what people think. It's not a well-organized machine. What he was successful and brilliant at doing is basically making his problem into your problem.
So so there's just 14 executives basically, and it's just that's what's going on, and it's just the day's events just circle around being summoned in and out of his office.
Correct. It could be off of something personal to him. It could be about an acquisition that he was interested in obtaining. It could be about You know, even something as ridiculous as increasing his perceived wealth by Forbes and having to meet with the Forbes representatives had to do with insurance and you name it. Anything that was on his mind. But he, again, was brilliant about how he went about this. He made whatever the task was, and the tasks were always problems. He made that task your problem.
You know, a lot of people ask me, because I knew him as well as anybody knew him. We were, you know, I did Apprentice for a few seasons. I lived in his building. He used to do my CNBC Big Idea show. We were involved with charity. I mean, you know, so I knew him about 10. Everybody always says to me, did you know any of this? Could you see any of this coming? And I always say, you know, he was like a lounge act. You know, you found him entertaining. You knew you didn't want to be in a foxhole with him. You wouldn't want to go in business with him, but you didn't see this dark side that was there. Looking back now, were there moments that you saw that now in hindsight you go, wait a second, there's real darkness here beyond, you know, what meets the eye?
The answer, sadly, is yes. And I beat myself up on a daily basis. And you know this, I've spoken to you about it almost like as a therapist, because I've never gone to one. I probably should. I beat myself up terribly that I should have walked out of that office and never looked back almost from day number one. I talk about this in my book when I turned around and I said that after I had purchased my apartment, which was 2 years before I ended up working for him. So I purchased in 2005, began working for him in 2007. The first thing out of his mouth was a lie to me. You know, I gave you a great deal on your apartment. I looked at him, I said, you want to buy it back? Right? I mean, you gave me a great deal. I said, I paid market price.
Right.
Right? I mean, you know, which should have told me something. But there were many things that he had said, racist shit, that I found so offensive, and yet I still did nothing. And I was enjoying my time there with my colleagues. I'm a deal junkie, so there was always 20 deals sitting on my desk. I had my own deals that I was working on. So why I did, it wasn't for the money, which of course, you know, again, even the judge, Paulie, who sentenced me, turned around and said, you know, you did this out of greed and stuff. That's not true. I mean, I was semi-retired at 39, which I was semi-retired at the age of 39, and I didn't need Donald's salary in order to live my life. So I'm angry at myself for not being a big enough man and walking out, you know. Why I didn't, despite the fact my wife, my daughter, my son all begged me to leave on a daily basis, to the point that I just made a house rule that I don't talk about what I do at work, and they don't talk about my work, and we stay, you know, a loving, you know, close family, but don't talk about my work because it's just going to lead to an argument. And it almost became like I was indoctrinated into this cult of Trump, which I know I was. And if I can give you just like a specific example, and I talk about again, you know, in the book, was the fact that we were sitting in his limo heading back to Trump's Chicago, the hotel and tower, when he made this racist, terribly racist comment as we were driving through a very poor neighborhood. And he just came right out, blurted out that only the blacks can live like this. I said to him, man, it's not really true. I've seen Orthodox Jewish neighborhoods that look like this. So he's like, no, only the blacks could live this way. Yeah. Basically, yeah, the blacks. And I should have known exactly who I was dealing with. He's made, you know, anti-Semitic comments to me, to my face, you know, and I should have walked. And I'm so angry at myself. It keeps me up at night so many times when my mind starts wandering, you know, at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And I get angrier and angrier. And it's one of the reasons why I accepted the responsibility, because I want him to also accept responsibility for what he did. Now, you know him better than you were characterizing. You know him probably as well as almost anybody that's
Right.
out there.
Yes.
Right? You know that Donald Trump will never, ever accept responsibility for anything. To the contrary, he learned very well from Roy Cohn, the famous attorney.
Sure.
Right? Deny, and always blame others.
And everything's a win. Even when it's a loss, it's a win. Yeah.
It's a win. Yeah.
It's interesting. You brought up, he said anti-Semitic things. What galls me so much is, and you and I both know a lot of these people, that they'll still defend Trump and their arguments, he's good for Israel, he's good. He'd fuck Israel in a heartbeat, wouldn't he? I mean, I want to hear from you that this guy has allegiances to nobody. So all of my friends that stand behind that bullshit and say, well, the reason I support him, he's good for Israel. He would fuck Israel just like he would fuck any other country and any other person in the world. He's got loyalty to nobody or nothing.
For $1.
Yeah.
For $1, he would let Israel crash and burn. I mean, people just don't understand. Oh, Donald Trump moved the embassy. He moved the embassy, and I want your listeners, in case that some of them are Donald Trump supporters, or there's some of these people that inaccurately believe the bullshit that Donald Trump is an Israel supporter. It's just not true, right? He did it because Sheldon Adelson's dying wish was that the embassy be moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
And Sheldon Adelson is probably his biggest single donor.
He was his biggest donor. He shelled out, from the numbers I heard, I mean, it could be like $50 million to Trump and the RNC for doing that. Now, for somebody like Sheldon Adelson, who was on his deathbed at the time, this was his dream come true, and Donald made it happen. But he didn't do it because it was right for Israel. Right. He did it for money. And that's what and if that doesn't express who Donald Trump is, it's no different than the pardons. Many of the people who received pardons received it because of financial. Based on at a finance. Yeah. And you're not supposed to be selling pardons, but that's what was happening. Donald Trump brought a concept to Washington that has never been seen before. And that is everything has a price.
Well, we know that's what's dictated his life. Michael, you're talking to me from your apartment, and you're still on home confinement. You spent, I guess, 2 years at Otisville?
I spent 13 months. 13
months. I was going to say talk to me about your day. I went to visit you there a few times, and even though it's a minimum security, there is going to prison is a really, really, really bleak thing. Talk to me about the first day you get there and what a day was like, and because it's hard to comprehend until you feel it and see it. I wasn't in there like you, but I was visiting you, and I was able to feel some of it.
So my first day arrival, I want people to understand that Otisville is a satellite camp. I self-surrendered, meaning I drove up to the institution myself. It wasn't the typical way. But my arrival caused tremendous consternation to the administration at Otisville. First of all, I was followed by 4 or 5 helicopters the entire way that basically flew over the property in order to catch a photo of me self-surrendering at the front door. That was something that they've never had before. There were also about 2,000 or 3,000 people lining, I think it's called like 6 Mile Drive that leads up to Otisville, with banners, some that were "We love you, stay strong," others that were like, "Drop dead. We hope you get killed." So it was a real mixed bag over there. You wake up. I woke up every day at 4:30 in the morning. I would then go to the library. I would eat with a bunch of my friends. We'd watch the news in the morning. We used to have a little breakfast bunch. Then I would go to the library for about 2 hours, where I would write what ultimately became the memoir, Disloyal. Then I would go to work. First I worked at the pipe shop, where we would build stuff, and I was helping to fix all of the fire hydrants. None of them worked, and redoing the bathrooms by putting new plumbing and new new stuff in. And I had a great time with this guy, Big Mike, and a whole crew of people. They're actually a bunch of really decent guys. Everybody was white collar, no violence in their PSR, their pre-sentencing reports. So it was not a dangerous place. And you didn't have communal showers. They were individual and individual bathroom stalls and so on. So none of that nonsense that you see on television, was I subjected to. But then after that, you come back at 11 o'clock for lunch. I would then either go back to work or I'd go back to the library and keep writing until ultimately, at nighttime. It's very boring. That's why I ended up being able to read 97 books in a year, something I love to do, but I never really had a chance to sit down with a free head and just read simply things and it was an amazing library that was run by my buddy Stevie. And the food was terrible. I've never had a piece of chicken in my life. I'm chicken phobic. And so, unfortunately, the amount of chicken that they serve there is enormous because chicken is so cheap. But I played tennis while I was there, basketball, we played softball.
You're making it seem a lot better than I remember visiting you. It seemed a lot bleaker. I mean, if I'm listening at home, I'm going, wow, that doesn't sound so horrible. What struck me about the loss of freedom and little things, when I would visit you, there was just a little room where all the visitors were, not very, very big. There'd be 6, 7, 8 other people visiting there. And there was a vending machine there. And I had all this crappy stuff in the vending machine and sticky buns.
Garbage. The worst food you can imagine.
And I remember I was getting something and I said, Michael, do you want something? Go, no, I can't eat from that vending machine. They just stripped, like you were not allowed to have a fucking cupcake that came from the vending machine. You got your meal in the morning, you got one meal. And that stuck with me, that little thing that you're told exactly what to do, how to do it, when to do it. And what does that feel like? That loss of freedom?
Misery. But there was nothing, just to be clear, what you were referring to, there were vending machines that had junk candy in it. It was all junk food for the most part, which is just terrible. And I'm not really a junk food eater. But you said, so, at nighttime, if you want to get a snack, are you able to get a snack? I said, no, it's only for visiting hours. You're allowed to buy it for me. There's no cash in the facility. There's no way to get, any of the candies. Now at nighttime, sometimes the guys used to rock the machine, in order for it to fall out, and they would sit and watch television.
Right.
And if a snack fell out, which, it just wasn't my thing. But there was nothing worse than missing your family. That was the hardest. And you're only able to make a certain number of calls. So you get 300 minutes of phone time for the month. And it's not free. You're paying like 25 cents a minute, which I think is wrong, that they basically are robbing people who don't have money, right, of 25 cents a minute. There's no cell phones or anything like that. So you have to use the regular payphone. And they charge you, and they, of course, monitor it, but you only get 300 minutes. So break that down. That's, at best, 10 minutes a day. Well, the problem is my son was in college, so I wanted to speak to him. I want to speak to my daughter, and, of course, I want to speak to my wife. That gives me 3 minutes to speak to each child. And what if one of them, is having an issue?
3 minutes, you get 3 minutes with each family member a day, basically, if you break it down that way.
Yeah, and what if one of your children have an issue, right? And of course, children always have an issue and they want to talk to you about it. 3 minutes flies by in the blink of an eye. Yeah. And it's just terrible. And then you get cut off and you can't call again. And if you use up all of your minutes, then you can go, like I did at one point at the beginning, you go almost 14 days. I went almost 14 days without being able to speak to my wife and to my children. And for me, Donny, my relationship with my wife and my children. It broke my heart. I wanted to die.
You got in a situation where you got into a little snafu where you ended up in solitary.
Yeah. We try not to talk about that.
No,
let me say this to you. I experienced the entire, the entire world of prison life. So the satellite camp, as I was saying, it's terrible to be away from your family, but it's like a really bad summer camp, a really cheap, garbagey summer camp that you go to. However, on the opposite side, which I showed you, and that was behind the razor wire with the, with the fencing and everything. I spent 51 days there in solitary confinement as a result of COVID, as well as being remanded back to prison based on the unconstitutional actions of Trump and Bill Barr when I refused to waive my First Amendment constitutional rights and not publish the book, Disloyal.
So what was that like? So what was that like in solitary?
It's terrible. You're locked in a 8 by 10 foot cell by yourself. I was there for 51 days. My window was broken. I asked them if I could have a piece of plastic and some tape so I can close it because I was getting wet as a result of the rain. There was missing a piece of glass, and they wouldn't even give me a piece of plastic and tape. The food was just
and you're literally
horrific.
in there. You're in there 23 hours a day.
24 hours a day.
24.
7 days a week, except Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays when you get 15 minutes to go take a shower.
What the fuck did you do? What did you do?
I read. I did push-ups, sit-ups, listened to music. I bought an MP3 player that would give me the ability to listen to like NPR or music stations that I was able to get. It's terrible. I mean, the place is dirty because I was missing a piece of glass. First of all, it was 105 degrees at the time in my cell with no ventilation. So even after you took a ice cold shower, by the time you get into your cell, you're sweating. It was absolute misery. When I tell you misery, 1 minute is equal to a year. And all you do is, honestly, you just try to figure out how to smash your skull over just to get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
It was terrible. It's inhuman. But I also experienced what you were referring to, the SHU, which is the segregated housing unit. I had an altercation, and while it was a stupid issue that resolved itself relatively quickly, I ended up in the SHU, which is even worse, believe it or not, than solitary confinement. It's like everything that you see on television with the screaming all night long, people yelling, banging their heads against I mean, that's where the disciplinary issues come in. That's when you shower, you're handcuffed, and then they unhandcuff you in the shower, through a door. And so it's just the whole experience was truly, it's inhuman, it's miserable. And again, what bothered me the most, of course, is the fact that I was there because of another man's dirty deeds and because I did what I thought was, the loyal and right thing to do for him, despite the fact that I lost my moral compass and I should have known better. But I do want to say something to you that even you don't know. Your listeners may find this interesting.
What?
You, my friend, almost got me thrown into the SHU.
Really?
Yes, really.
What the hell did I do?
When you showed up to visit, and you were there and you had the big Escalade that brought you there.
Right.
You had to piss. So what did you do? You went over to a tree and you pissed because there was no outdoor, right? All of a sudden, I get called in to the camp administrator, the camp counselor, and he turns around and he goes, "Dude, what's going on?" So I look at him, I don't know, you called me in. What do you want? So he says to me, so he turns around, he says to me, "Your boy, Donny Deutsch." I said, "Yeah, he's coming to visit me." There's like 15 minutes before. He goes, "He's pissing on a tree." I said to him, right? So what do you want from me? I didn't tell him to do it, did I? So he goes, "He can't be pissing on the trees." So I said, because this guy's voice was like a stupid Vinnie Barbarino from Welcome Back Home. Yeah. So he said to me, "You got to tell him. There were people there with their kids and women and so on." I'm like,
no, there was nobody there. It was in the forest. I was driven up for 2 hours.
I said he went down. I know. And you come in with your gigantic Starbucks and shit. And all of a sudden he goes, "If he does it again, you're going to the SHU."
Oh my God.
I said, wait. I said, hold on a second. I'm going to go to the SHU because Donny Deutsch pissed on a tree and nobody saw it. It's like, so I said to him, "Hey, DeLeo, question for you. If a fucking tree falls and nobody saw it, did it fall?" I said,
man.
"There's nobody there. What are you talking about? How am I supposed to fit when Donny pisses?"
Single greatest and lowest moment on this podcast. So, Michael, I did not know that story.
Oh almost ended up in the shoe because Donnie has to pee on the tree.
So let's talk about 3 months from now. You're a complete free man. You got the rest of your life. What does the next chapter look like?
You know, I don't really know. It's really very difficult when you have that felony conviction next to your name. You know, the banks don't want to work with you. Why? I don't know. I have never owed a single dollar to any person or any institution ever. Right? It goes back to what I was telling you. I've never had an overseas bank account. I've never had nominees. None of that tax evasion shit was real. But the banks still don't want to work with you because of your high-profile nature. That takes a while before which you're working in. And I would have gone back into the real estate world. I had done very well for myself. You know, I had owned several buildings and never had an issue even with a single tenant. Not a single issue with a single tenant. I've never been late on a payment, even on a credit card or an electric, nothing. And so, you know, what's next? Well, I'm working on a second book about the Department of Injustice. I'm working on a television show at the moment, as well as a radio show. The podcast is doing very
Michael,
well.
Your podcast is through the roof. You're averaging 1 million downloads a month. I mean, that's crazy.
1.3 now. 1.3 million downloads a month.
That's crazy. The podcast is Mea Culpa. You got to go listen to it. It's fantastic.
It's really, and it's very, very well received. The television show is great, and I'm working on. There's some interest in terms of taking the book Disloyal and converting it into a full-length feature film. So it looks like I'll probably go more into the entertainment world, as opposed to. I mean, I'm never going to get my law license back, and to be honest with you, I don't even want it back.
I hear you.
I really don't even want it back.
Well, Michael, you've certainly paid your due. Everybody's always asking me about you, and I always say what a good guy you are. You got caught up with the wrong dude. You turned around. You're writing your life, and I want everybody to know what a great dad and husband you are. And I wish you nothing but good stuff in the future. And what is amazing is to spend time with you in public and the amount of people that will literally stop and say, thank you. And, you know, look, you had to pay a price for it. But hopefully some of your workings will be what takes this guy down and his family down, because that's where they belong. The podcast
but Donnie, then before you end up concluding, but then, of course, they would say, and then they look and they're like, they see it's Donny Deutsch. Like, my God, you're so handsome. And I'm sitting there like, well, what? I said, are you talking to me? And they're like, no, we're talking to Donnie. I said, fuck you. I'm like, you know that picture you wanted with me? Go take it with Donnie.
The podcast is Mea Culpa. The book, New York Times best-selling book, Disloyal. Michael Cohen, my friend, thank you for spending time today.
Great seeing you, Donnie. Love you, pal.
Love you, buddy. Hope you enjoyed my interview with Michael Cohen. Fascinating stuff. A guy who's kind of been down and on his way back up. Remember to subscribe, rate, and review on any and all platforms of podcasts, Spotify, Apple, anywhere you get podcasts. So remember, rate, review, and subscribe to On Brand with Donny Deutsch. You can also catch the videos on YouTube. Subscribe there also. Have a great week. We'll see you guys next week on Brand. Don't remember to stay on brand. Everybody, thanks for watching. If you like it, hit that subscribe button. And we love having you here watching On Brand. And just don't miss any future episodes. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time.